The spring air of Magnolia Springs, a prestigious suburb of Houston, Texas, carried the sweet fragrance of blooming magnolia trees as Victoria Elizabeth Chamberlain stood before her bedroom mirror on the evening of April 18, 1998. At 28 years old, Victoria was the epitome of grace and elegance, with her golden blonde hair cascading in perfect waves and her emerald green eyes sparkling with anticipation. As the only daughter of oil magnate Theodore Chamberlain III, Victoria had grown up in a world of privilege, but her heart belonged to Christ and to charitable works throughout the Houston area. "Victoria, darling, you look absolutely radiant," her mother, Catherine and Chamberlain, said as she entered the spacious bedroom of their Magnolia Springs mansion. The room overlooked the sprawling estate grounds, where ancient oak trees draped in Spanish moss created a canopy over manicured gardens that had taken decades to perfect. Victoria turned from the mirror, her white silk blouse and pearl necklace reflecting her refined upbringing. "Thank you, Mother. I can hardly believe that in 2 days, I'll be Mrs. Jonathan Alexander Westbrook. God has truly blessed me with the most wonderful man." Jonathan Westbrook, 32, was a successful investment banker from one of Houston's most prominent families. He had met Victoria 2 years earlier at a charity gala for Houston Methodist Hospital, where Victoria served on the board of directors despite her young age. Their courtship had been the talk of Houston society, and their upcoming wedding at First Presbyterian Church of Magnolia Springs was anticipated to be the social event of the year. "Your father and I are so proud of the woman you've become," Catherine continued, adjusting her daughter's pearl earrings. "Your commitment to your faith and your charitable work makes us prouder than all the money in the world ever could." Victoria smiled, thinking of the numerous causes she supported, the Houston Food Bank, Habitat for Humanity, and a special program she had started to provide scholarships for underprivileged children to attend Christian schools. Her Bible study group at First Presbyterian had become legendary among the young women of Magnolia Springs, as Victoria's deep understanding of Scripture and her genuine care for others drew people to both her and to Christ. "Speaking of which," Victoria said, glancing at her diamond-encrusted watch, "Amanda should be here any moment. I'm actually a little nervous about tonight. You know how Amanda can get when she's been drinking, and some of her friends from Rice University are quite worldly." Amanda Grace Montgomery had been Victoria's best friend since childhood. The daughter of a prominent Houston attorney, Amanda was beautiful and vivacious, but she had never shared Victoria's deep faith commitment. While Victoria spent her college years at Baylor University studying theology and business, Amanda had pursued a liberal arts degree at Rice, where she had developed a taste for parties and a lifestyle that often concerned Victoria. "Just remember, darling," Catherine advised, "you can be a light to others without compromising your own values. Sometimes the best testimony is simply living your faith quietly and consistently." A soft knock on the bedroom door interrupted their conversation. Maria Santos, the family's longtime housekeeper, appeared in the doorway. "Miss Victoria, Miss Amanda has arrived with several other young ladies. They're waiting in the foyer." Victoria took a deep breath and whispered a quick prayer, "Lord, help me to honor you tonight and to be a good friend to Amanda while staying true to my convictions. Keep us all safe and let this evening bring glory to your name." Downstairs in the marble-floored foyer, Amanda Montgomery stood with 5 other young women, all dressed in elegant evening wear. Amanda, with her striking auburn hair and bold red lipstick, commanded attention wherever she went. Her emerald green cocktail dress hugged her figure perfectly, and her confidence was infectious. "Victoria!" Amanda called out as her friend descended the grand staircase. "You look absolutely stunning. Are you ready for the most amazing bachelorette party Houston has ever seen?" Victoria felt a flutter of anxiety as she noticed the champagne bottles that some of Amanda's friends were already carrying. "Amanda, you know I don't drink, and I was hoping we could keep things elegant tonight." "Oh, don't worry," Amanda laughed, though there was something in her eyes that Victoria couldn't quite read. "I've planned the perfect evening. We're starting with dinner at that new French restaurant downtown, then maybe some dancing at the country club. Nothing too wild, I promise." The other young women introduced themselves, Jennifer Walsh and Patricia Moore from Amanda's sorority at Rice, Christina Du Bois, a model from New York who was visiting Houston, and surprisingly, Sarah Beth Williams and Rebecca Grace Miller from Victoria's own Bible study group at First Presbyterian. "I'm so glad you two decided to come," Victoria said warmly to Sarah Beth and Rebecca. "It means so much to have my Christian sisters with me tonight." Sarah Beth, a petite brunette with kind eyes, hugged Victoria tightly. "We wouldn't miss it for the world. We've been praying that God would bless your marriage to Jonathan and that tonight would be a wonderful celebration of the new season he's bringing into your life." As the group prepared to leave in Amanda's luxury SUV, Theodore Chamberlain appeared from his study. The imposing patriarch of the Chamberlain family stood 6 feet 4 inches tall, with silver hair and eyes that reflected both business acumen and deep love for his daughter. "Victoria, sweetheart," he said, embracing her gently, "your old father wanted to see you off. You girls have a wonderful time, but remember that tomorrow is the rehearsal dinner and Sunday is your wedding day. We need our bride to be well rested and radiant." "Don't worry, Daddy," Victoria replied, using the childhood name she had never outgrown. "Amanda has promised to have me home at a reasonable hour. Besides, I would never want to do anything that might disappoint you or Mother, or Jonathan." Theodore's expression softened as he looked at his daughter. Despite their wealth and social standing, the Chamberlain family had always prioritized their Christian faith above material success. Theodore served as an elder at First Presbyterian, and Catherine led the women's ministry. Victoria had grown up understanding that privilege came with responsibility, and that their blessings were meant to be shared with others. "You could never disappoint us, Angel," Theodore said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've grown into exactly the kind of woman your mother and I prayed you would become. Strong in faith, generous in spirit, and wise beyond your years." As the group of women climbed into Amanda's pearl-white Mercedes SUV, Victoria felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. The vehicle was luxurious, with leather seats and a state-of-the-art sound system that Amanda immediately turned up to play the latest pop hits. The contrast between the worldly music and Victoria's usual preference for contemporary Christian music was stark, but she tried to maintain a positive attitude. "So, Victoria," Christina Du Bois said from the back seat, her New York accent cutting through the music, "Amanda tells me you're really religious." "That's so interesting. I don't think I've ever met anyone our age who actually takes that stuff seriously." Victoria felt her cheeks flush, but Sarah Beth quickly came to her defense. "Victoria's faith isn't just religious tradition," she said firmly. "She has a real relationship with Jesus Christ, and it shows in how she lives her life. She's one of the most genuine, caring people I've ever known." "That's right," Rebecca added. "Victoria started a scholarship program that has already helped over 50 children get Christian educations. She visits nursing homes every week, and she's never too busy to pray with someone or offer encouragement when they're going through difficult times." Amanda glanced at Victoria in the rearview mirror, and again Victoria noticed something strange in her friend's expression. It was almost resentful. But that couldn't be right. Amanda had always supported Victoria's charitable work, even if she didn't share her faith. "Well," Amanda said with a laugh that sounded slightly forced, "tonight we're celebrating Victoria the woman, not Victoria the saint. We're going to have some fun for once." The French restaurant, Le Jardin, was located in Houston's upscale Galleria area. As they were seated at a private table overlooking the city lights, Victoria marveled at the beauty of the evening. The restaurant's elegant atmosphere, with its crystal chandeliers and fresh floral arrangements, created the perfect setting for a sophisticated celebration. "I have to admit," Victoria said as they studied their menus, "this is lovely, Amanda. Thank you for putting so much thought into making tonight special." But as the evening progressed, Victoria began to feel increasingly uncomfortable. Amanda ordered wine for the table despite Victoria's polite request to skip alcohol. Jennifer and Patricia shared increasingly inappropriate stories about their college experiences, while Christina regaled them with tales from the modeling world that made Victoria's cheeks burn. "Victoria, you're being awfully quiet," Amanda observed as the main course arrived. "This is your bachelorette party. You're supposed to be having fun. I am having fun, Victoria replied, though her voice lacked conviction. The food is wonderful, and I'm grateful to be surrounded by friends. I suppose I'm thinking about Jonathan and our wedding day. I can't wait to start our life together as husband and wife. Sarah Beth reached over and squeezed Victoria's hand. That's beautiful, Victoria. It's obvious how much you love Jonathan and how excited you are to honor God in your marriage. Amanda's laugh was sharp. Oh yes, perfect Jonathan. The golden boy who can do no wrong. Tell me, Victoria, don't you ever wonder what it would be like to be with someone a little more exciting? Someone with a little mystery, a little danger. Victoria looked at her friend in surprise. Amanda, what do you mean? Jonathan is everything I could ask for in a husband. He loves God, he treats me with respect and kindness, he supports my charitable work, and he makes me laugh every day. What more could I want? I don't know, Amanda said, taking another sip of wine. Maybe someone who sees you as more than just the perfect Christian princess. Someone who appreciates your other qualities. The comment hung in the air uncomfortably, and Victoria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the restaurant's air conditioning. Something was definitely wrong with Amanda tonight, but Victoria couldn't put her finger on what it was. After dinner, the group moved to the exclusive River Oaks Country Club, where Amanda had arranged for them to have access to the private bar and dancing area. The club, with its old-world elegance and stunning views of the Houston skyline, was familiar territory for Victoria, as her family had been members for decades. Ladies, Amanda announced as they settled into a secluded corner booth, I have a special surprise for our bride-to-be. She produced a small wrapped gift from her purse and handed it to Victoria with a smile that seemed genuine for the first time all evening. Victoria carefully unwrapped the gift to reveal a beautiful gold locket with intricate engravings. Amanda, it's gorgeous. Thank you so much. Open it, Amanda urged. Inside the locket was a photo of Victoria and Amanda from their high school graduation, both smiling brightly in their caps and gowns. On the opposite side was an engraving that read, Friends Forever, AGM. This is so thoughtful, Victoria said, her eyes filling with tears. Despite our differences over the years, you've always been such an important part of my life. I want you to know how much our friendship means to me. For a moment, Amanda's carefully composed facade cracked, and Victoria glimpsed something vulnerable and sad in her friend's eyes. Victoria, there's something I need to tell you. Something important about Jonathan. But before Amanda could continue, a commotion near the bar caught their attention. A group of young men had arrived, and one of them was calling out Amanda's name. Victoria recognized him as Bradley Crawford, a notorious playboy from one of Houston's oldest families who had a reputation for wild behavior and questionable business dealings. Amanda. Bradley called out, his voice slightly slurred from alcohol. There's my beautiful girl. And this must be the famous Victoria Chamberlain, the Virgin Bride of Houston. Victoria felt her face burn with embarrassment as several people in the club turned to look at their table. This was exactly the kind of attention she had hoped to avoid tonight. Bradley, not now, Amanda said sharply, but the man was already approaching their table with his friends in tow. Oh, come on, Amanda. Don't tell me you're going to waste the whole evening playing nursemaid to Little Miss Perfect. I thought you said you were going to show her how to have some real fun tonight. Victoria's blood ran cold. Amanda had discussed her with Bradley Crawford. And what did he mean about showing her how to have real fun? Sarah Beth and Rebecca both stood up, sensing that the situation was about to deteriorate. Victoria, Sarah Beth said quietly, maybe we should call it a night. We can ask the valet to call us a taxi. But Amanda quickly moved to block their path. No, wait. The night is still young. Victoria, you haven't even danced yet. Come on, just one dance with Bradley. He's actually quite charming when you get to know him. Amanda, I don't dance with men other than Jonathan, Victoria said firmly. You know that. And I'm getting very uncomfortable with the direction this evening is taking. I think Sarah Beth is right. We should go home. Bradley laughed loudly. Amanda, you didn't tell me your friend was this uptight. No wonder Jonathan is already looking for some excitement elsewhere. The comment hit Victoria like a physical blow. What did you say? Amanda's face went pale. Bradley, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. But Bradley, emboldened by alcohol and the attention he was receiving, continued. Oh, come on, Victoria. You must know that Jonathan has been seen around town with other women. Amanda's been trying to protect you, but honey, your perfect fiancé is not as faithful as you think he is. Victoria felt the room spinning around her. That's not true. Jonathan loves me. We're getting married on Sunday. He would never. Victoria, don't listen to him, Sarah Beth said urgently. He's been drinking, and he clearly doesn't know what he's saying. Jonathan adores you. Anyone can see that. But Victoria was staring at Amanda, whose face had gone completely white. Amanda? Is there something you need to tell me? Amanda's hands were shaking as she reached for her purse. Victoria, let's go outside. We need to talk privately. The group moved toward the club's outdoor terrace, which overlooked the perfectly manicured golf course. The April evening was warm and humid, typical for Houston in spring, and the sound of crickets filled the air. Security lights illuminated the terrace, creating an atmosphere that would have been romantic under different circumstances. Amanda, Victoria said once they were alone, what is Bradley talking about? Do you know something about Jonathan that I don't? Amanda was crying now, her perfectly applied makeup running down her cheeks. Victoria, I never wanted it to happen this way. I wanted to protect you, but I couldn't stand watching you marry him knowing what I know. What do you know? Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. Jonathan has been having an affair, Amanda said, her words coming out in a rush. With me. For the past 6 months. He says he loves you, but that he needs something more exciting, more passionate than what you can give him. He's planning to go through with the wedding because of your family's money and social connections, but he has no intention of being faithful to you. Victoria felt as though the ground beneath her feet had given way. Everything she believed about her life, her future, her faith in God's plan for her marriage, was crumbling before her eyes. You're lying, she whispered. You have to be lying. Jonathan loves me. He tells me so every day. He prays with me. He talks about the children we'll have and the ministry we'll do together. I'm so sorry, Victoria, Amanda sobbed. I never meant for it to go this far. It started as just a flirtation at one of your charity events. Jonathan said he was feeling trapped, that he needed to sow some wild oats before settling down. I thought it would just be a brief fling, but then. Then what? Victoria demanded, her voice growing stronger despite her tears. Then I fell in love with him, Amanda admitted. And he with me. We've been planning to disappear together after the wedding. He was going to take a large portion of your trust fund and we were going to start over somewhere else. South America, maybe, or Europe. Victoria sank into one of the terrace chairs, her entire world collapsing around her. Why are you telling me this now? Why tonight? Amanda was crying so hard she could barely speak. Because I can't do it anymore. I can't watch you walk down that aisle believing in a lie. I love Jonathan, but I love you too, Victoria. You've been my best friend since we were children. You don't deserve this. The other women had remained inside, giving Victoria and Amanda privacy, but Victoria could see them through the glass doors, their faces filled with concern and confusion. Does anyone else know? Victoria asked. No. At least, I don't think so. Jonathan made me promise to keep it secret until after the wedding. He said it would be easier if you never knew the truth. Victoria stood up abruptly, her mind racing. I need to go home. I need to think. I need to pray. Victoria, please, Amanda said, reaching for her friend's arm. I know I've hurt you terribly, but please don't do anything rash. Maybe we can figure out a way to work through this. Victoria pulled away from Amanda's touch. Work through this? You've been sleeping with my fiancé. You've helped him plan to steal from my family. And you've let me plan a wedding that's based on nothing but lies. Her voice was rising, and she struggled to regain control of her emotions. I know, Amanda cried. But maybe if we talk to Jonathan together, we can convince him to call off the wedding honestly. You don't have to face the humiliation of being left at the altar. Victoria stared at her former best friend, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. You don't understand, do you? This isn't about my reputation or avoiding humiliation. This is about my heart, my faith, my entire future. I believed God had brought Jonathan into my life. I thought he was blessing me with a godly husband who would help me serve him better. Now I find out that everything I believed was a lie. She began walking toward the doors leading back inside. I'm going home. Don't follow me. Don't call me. I need time to figure out what to do with the information you've given me. But as Victoria rejoined the group inside, she found that Bradley Crawford and his friends had ordered another round of drinks and were becoming increasingly belligerent. The club's management was clearly growing concerned about the disturbance. There she is. Bradley called out when he saw Victoria. The blushing bride. So, have you decided to live a little before you tie yourself down to boring old Jonathan? Leave me alone, Victoria said firmly, trying to push past him to reach Sarah Beth and Rebecca. But Bradley grabbed her arm, his grip tight and unwelcome. Oh, come on, sweetheart. One dance won't kill you. I promise I'll be a perfect gentleman. Let go of me, Victoria said, her voice carrying the authority she had learned from years of leading charity committees and Bible studies. Instead of releasing her, Bradley pulled her closer. You know, Amanda's right about you. You really are uptight. But I bet underneath all that Christian girl facade, there's a real woman just waiting to come out. Victoria wrenched her arm free and slapped Bradley across the face, the sound echoing across the club's dance floor. How dare you touch me without permission? And how dare you speak to me that way? The slap seemed to sober Bradley momentarily, but it also enraged him. You self-righteous little princess. You think you're better than everyone else just because your daddy has money and you go to church. Before anyone could react, Bradley lunged toward Victoria, but Amanda quickly stepped between them. Bradley, stop. Leave her alone. Oh, so now you're protecting little Miss Perfect? Bradley sneered. I thought you said you were tired of always being in her shadow. The comment revealed more than Amanda had intended to share with Bradley about her feelings toward Victoria. Victoria felt another piece of her heart break as she realized that her best friend's betrayal went deeper than just the affair with Jonathan. Victoria, we need to leave. Now, Sarah Beth said urgently, appearing at Victoria's side with Rebecca close behind. The club's security had finally intervened, approaching Bradley and his friends to escort them out. In the chaos that followed, Victoria found herself separated from the group, standing alone near the club's rear exit. Victoria! Amanda called out, pushing through the crowd toward her. Wait! Please, let me drive you home. We need to talk more about this. But Victoria was no longer listening to Amanda. Her mind was reeling from the revelations of the evening, and all she wanted was to get away from the club, away from the noise and the alcohol and the painful memories that would forever be associated with this night. I'll find my own way home, Victoria said, pushing through the rear door and out into the parking lot. The parking lot was dimly lit, with only a few security lights casting long shadows between the rows of expensive cars. Victoria walked quickly toward the street, planning to call a taxi from the pay phone she had noticed near the club's entrance. Victoria, please wait. Amanda's voice called from behind her. Victoria turned around to see Amanda running after her, her high heels clicking on the asphalt. Behind Amanda, she could see Sarah Beth and Rebecca emerging from the club, looking around frantically. "What do you want, Amanda?" Victoria asked, her voice heavy with exhaustion and heartbreak. "I want to make this right," Amanda said, reaching out toward Victoria. "I know I've hurt you, but maybe we can find a way to fix this." "Maybe we can." "Fix this?" Victoria interrupted. "How do you fix betrayal, Amanda? How do you fix the fact that my best friend and my fiancé have been lying to me for months? How do you fix the fact that I've been planning a wedding to a man who intends to steal from my family and abandon me?" Amanda was crying again, her mascara creating dark streaks down her cheeks. "I don't know, but we have to try. Our friendship means too much to just throw it away." Victoria looked at the woman who had been her closest friend since childhood, and felt nothing but sadness. "Our friendship was thrown away the moment you decided to seduce my fiancé. Everything between us has been a lie." She turned and began walking toward the street again, but Amanda grabbed her arm. "Victoria, please. I love you like a sister. I made a terrible mistake, but I can't lose you. You're the best person I know. You're the only person who's ever truly believed in me." "If I'm so important to you," Victoria said, pulling free from Amanda's grasp, "then why did you betray me with the man I love?" Amanda's face crumpled. "Because I was jealous. Because everything always comes so easily to you. You have loving parents, unlimited money, natural beauty, and a faith that makes everyone around you feel loved and accepted. I've always felt like I was living in your shadow, like I was the runner-up in every aspect of my life." The confession hung in the humid night air between them. Victoria stared at Amanda, seeing her friend's pain but unable to find any compassion in her heart at that moment. "So you decided to take the one thing that mattered most to me," Victoria said quietly. "My future husband." "I never meant for it to go this far," Amanda whispered. "I just wanted to feel special to someone, to feel chosen over you for once in my life." Victoria felt tears streaming down her own cheeks now. "Amanda, if you had come to me and told me you were struggling with jealousy, I would have done anything to help you work through those feelings. If you had told me you were attracted to Jonathan, I would have. I don't know what I would have done, but I would have tried to find a way to preserve our friendship. But instead, you chose deception and betrayal." A car was approaching from the far end of the parking lot, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Victoria hoped it might be a taxi she could flag down, but as it drew closer, she realized it was Jonathan's silver BMW. "Oh no," Amanda whispered. "He wasn't supposed to be here tonight." The car stopped near where they were standing, and Jonathan Westbrook emerged from the driver's seat. At 32, he was undeniably handsome, with dark hair, blue eyes, and the kind of confident bearing that came from a lifetime of privilege. He was wearing a casual button-down shirt and khakis, looking every inch the successful young executive. "What's going on here?" Jonathan asked, his eyes moving between Victoria and Amanda. "Victoria, what are you doing outside by yourself? And Amanda, why do you look like you've been crying?" Victoria stared at the man she had planned to marry in less than 36 hours, trying to reconcile the Jonathan she thought she knew with the one Amanda had described. This was the man who had held her hand during her grandmother's funeral, who had prayed with her before every major decision, who had told her he loved her just that morning. "Jonathan," Victoria said, her voice barely audible, "Amanda has told me some very disturbing things about you and her. About your relationship." Jonathan's face went pale, and he looked quickly at Amanda, who was now sobbing openly. "What exactly did she tell you?" "She told me that you've been having an affair with her for the past 6 months, Victoria said, watching Jonathan's face carefully for his reaction. "She told me that you're planning to leave me after the wedding and steal money from my trust fund." Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, and Victoria could see him calculating his response. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold and distant, unlike any tone she had ever heard from him before. "Amanda shouldn't have told you that," he said. "We agreed to wait until after the wedding." Victoria felt her knees buckle, and she had to grab onto a nearby car to steady herself. So it's true. All of it? Jonathan sighed, as if her discovery was merely an inconvenience. Victoria, you have to understand that our engagement was always more of a business arrangement than a love match. Our families wanted the union, and it made sense financially and socially. But I'm a man with needs and desires that you couldn't understand or fulfill. What does that mean? Victoria asked, though she dreaded the answer. It means that you're a wonderful girl, Victoria, but you're not exactly passionate. You're sweet and kind and charitable, but you're also naive and sheltered. I need a woman who can match my intensity, who understands the world outside of church committee meetings and charity luncheons. Each word felt like a knife in Victoria's chest. But you told me you loved me. You said you wanted to build a life together, serve God together, raise children together. Jonathan shrugged. I told you what you needed to hear to keep you happy until the wedding. Amanda and I have real chemistry, real passion. We understand each other in ways that you and I never could. Victoria turned to look at Amanda, who was now leaning against Jonathan's car for support. And you are willing to let me walk down the aisle tomorrow believing in a lie? The original plan was for you never to find out, Amanda said weakly. Jonathan was going to be a good husband publicly, and I was going to be the friend who helped you through the difficult times when he seemed distant or busy. It seemed kinder than breaking your heart before the wedding. Kinder? Victoria's voice rose. You thought it would be kinder to let me marry a man who didn't love me, who was planning to rob my family, and who intended to continue his affair with my best friend? You thought that was the kind option? Jonathan stepped forward, and for a moment, Victoria thought he might try to touch her or offer some gesture of comfort. Instead, he simply said, Victoria, you need to decide what you're going to do with this information. The wedding is tomorrow evening. A lot of people have spent a lot of money and made a lot of arrangements. If you're thinking of calling it off, you need to consider the consequences. Are you threatening me? Victoria asked in disbelief. I'm being practical, Jonathan replied. Your father has invested significant resources in this wedding. My family has done the same. If you create a scandal by canceling at the last minute, there will be financial and social repercussions for everyone involved. Victoria stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time the calculating, selfish man behind the charming facade. You're actually trying to manipulate me into going through with a fraudulent marriage to protect your own reputation. I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone, Jonathan said. Look, we can make this work. We'll have a good marriage publicly. You can continue your charity work and your church activities. I'll be a respectable husband and father. And what happens privately between consenting adults is no one else's business. The suggestion was so callous, so completely opposite to everything Victoria believed about marriage and commitment, that she felt physically ill. You want me to agree to a sham marriage where you continue your affair with my best friend? She asked. You want me to live a lie for the rest of my life? Women have done it for centuries, Jonathan said with a shrug. It's called being sophisticated about marriage. You get security, social status, and children. I get financial stability and family connections. Amanda gets what she wants. Everyone wins. Victoria looked between the two people who had been the most important relationships in her life outside of her family, and felt something die inside her heart. Not just her love for them, but her faith in her own judgment, her confidence in God's plan for her life, and her trust in the people she had allowed closest to her heart. I need to go home, she said quietly. I need to think and pray about what to do next. Victoria, Amanda said desperately, please don't make any hasty decisions. Maybe if we all sleep on it, we can find a way to work through this that doesn't hurt anyone unnecessarily. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Don't hurt anyone unnecessarily. Amanda, you and Jonathan have already destroyed my faith in love, friendship, and God's plan for my life. I'm not sure there's any way to hurt me more than you already have. She began walking toward the street again, but Jonathan caught up with her. "Victoria, wait. Let me drive you home. We shouldn't leave things like this." "I'm not getting in a car with either of you," Victoria said firmly. "I'll call a taxi." But as she reached for her purse to find change for the pay phone, she realized she had left it inside the club during the confrontation with Bradley Crawford. Her purse, with her identification, credit cards, and emergency cash, was still sitting at their table. "My purse," she said, more to herself than to Jonathan or Amanda. "I left my purse inside." "I'll get it for you," Amanda offered quickly. "Just wait here." "No," Victoria said. "I'll get it myself. I don't want you doing me any more favors." She turned back toward the club, but as she did, she saw Bradley Crawford and his friends emerging from the building. They had obviously been ejected by security, and Bradley looked angry and intoxicated. Well, Bradley called out when he spotted their group. "If it isn't the happy couple and their bridesmaid. Are you all having a little pre-wedding drama?" "Go away, Bradley," Jonathan said sharply. "This doesn't concern you." But Bradley was beyond reason, emboldened by alcohol and humiliation. "Oh, but it does concern me. You see, I've been listening to Amanda talk about this little triangle for weeks. She's been quite entertaining at parties, describing how she's been sleeping with Houston's golden boy behind his innocent fiancé's back." Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. Amanda had been discussing their situation at parties. How many people in Houston society already knew about the affair? "Amanda," Victoria whispered, "how many people know?" Amanda's silence was answer enough. "Oh, honey," Bradley laughed cruelly, "half of Houston knows about Jonathan and Amanda. The only person who didn't know was you. Everyone's been wondering how long it would take for someone to tell the naive little rich girl that her Prince Charming was playing around." The humiliation was complete. Not only had Victoria been betrayed by the two people she trusted most, but she had been made a fool of in front of Houston's entire social circle. People had been laughing about her naivety behind her back for months. "I have to get out of here," Victoria said, her voice barely audible. She began walking rapidly toward the street, no longer caring about her purse or calling a taxi. She just needed to get away from all of them, to find somewhere quiet where she could process what had happened and figure out what to do next. Behind her, she could hear Amanda calling her name and Jonathan arguing with Bradley Crawford, but she didn't turn around. She walked quickly through the club's parking lot, past the valet stand, and onto the busy Houston street. The night was warm and humid, typical for April in Houston, and the city lights blurred through her tears as she walked without any clear destination in mind. She was wearing delicate evening shoes that weren't meant for walking long distances, and her elegant outfit was attracting attention from late-night pedestrians and drivers. After walking for what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Victoria found herself in a part of Houston she didn't recognize. The area was darker than the well-lit Galleria district, with fewer people on the streets and a distinctly less affluent atmosphere. She sat down on a bus bench under a streetlight and tried to think clearly about her situation. She had no money, no identification, and no way to contact her family or get home safely. Her feet were bleeding from walking in inappropriate shoes, and she was beginning to realize how vulnerable she was as a young woman alone in an unfamiliar part of the city late at night. "God," she whispered, looking up at the stars that were barely visible through Houston's light pollution, "I don't understand what's happening to me. This morning I thought I knew exactly what my life was going to look like. I thought you had blessed me with a loving husband and a bright future. Now everything is falling apart, and I don't know who to trust or what to believe. Please help me. Please show me what to do." As she sat on the bench praying, a car pulled up to the curb nearby. Victoria's heart began racing, remembering all the warnings she had heard about the dangers of being alone in unfamiliar neighborhoods at night. But when the car door opened, she saw a middle-aged African-American woman emerging from the driver's seat. "Honey," the woman called out, "are you all right? You look like you might need some help." Victoria hesitated, remembering her parents' warnings about trusting strangers. But something about the woman's voice and demeanor seemed genuinely concerned rather than threatening. I'm not sure," Victoria admitted. "I'm lost, and I don't have any money or a way to get home." The woman approached slowly, keeping her hands visible and her movements non-threatening. "My name is Grace Washington. I'm a nurse at Houston Methodist Hospital, and I'm just getting off my shift. Can you tell me your name and what happened to you?" "Victoria," she replied, leaving off her last name. "I was at a party with friends, and there was a disagreement. I left without my purse, and now I'm stranded." Grace studied Victoria's expensive clothing and jewelry, clearly recognizing that she came from wealth and privilege. "Honey, where do you live? I can give you a ride home, or we can call the police to help you get in touch with your family." Victoria considered her options. She couldn't face going home to her parents' house and explaining what had happened. She wasn't ready to deal with the questions, the disappointment, and the need to make decisions about the wedding that was scheduled for the next evening. "Actually," Victoria said slowly, "is there a church nearby that might be open? I need somewhere quiet to think and pray." Grace smiled for the first time since approaching. "As a matter of fact, I attend a small community church just a few blocks from here. Pastor Williams often keeps the sanctuary open late for people who need a place to pray. Would you like me to take you there?" Victoria nodded gratefully. "Yes, please. That would be wonderful." As they drove through the Houston streets, Grace didn't press Victoria for details about her situation, but she did share that she had been attending New Hope Community Church for over 20 years, and that Pastor Williams was known throughout the neighborhood for his compassion and wisdom. "He's helped a lot of people through difficult times," Grace said as they pulled into the parking lot of a modest brick building with a simple wooden cross mounted above the entrance. "Whatever you're going through, honey, Pastor Williams has probably seen something similar before." New Hope Community Church was nothing like the Grand Presbyterian Church where Victoria and her family worshipped. It was small and simple, with plain glass windows and well-worn furniture that spoke of decades of faithful use by people who were more concerned with substance than style. Pastor Williams was indeed in the sanctuary, sitting in the front pew with his Bible open, apparently preparing for the next day's sermon. He was a man in his 60s, with graying hair and kind eyes that reflected both wisdom and compassion. "Pastor Williams," Grace called out softly as they entered the sanctuary, "I brought someone who needs a safe place to pray and think." The pastor looked up and immediately stood to greet them. "Of course. Welcome to New Hope, young lady. I'm Pastor David Williams, and you're welcome to stay here as long as you need." Victoria introduced herself simply as Victoria, and Pastor Williams didn't press for additional information. He showed her to a quiet corner of the sanctuary where she could pray privately, and assured her that he would be nearby if she needed anything. "Sometimes," Pastor Williams said gently, "the Lord allows us to walk through valleys so that we can learn to depend on Him more completely. Whatever brought you here tonight, know that God sees your heart and He has a plan for your life." Alone in the peaceful sanctuary, Victoria knelt on the worn carpet and poured out her heart to God. She prayed for wisdom about what to do regarding the wedding, for strength to forgive Amanda and Jonathan despite their betrayal, and for clarity about God's plan for her future. Hours passed as Victoria wrestled with her emotions and sought God's guidance. The sanctuary was quiet except for the occasional sound of traffic outside and the soft whisper of air conditioning. As dawn began to break over Houston, Victoria felt a sense of peace settling over her heart. She knew what she had to do. The morning of April 19, 1998, dawned clear and bright over Magnolia Springs, but the Chamberlain mansion was shrouded in confusion and growing alarm. Victoria had not returned home the night before, and when her mother went to wake her for the wedding rehearsal breakfast, she found an empty bed that had never been slept in. Catherine Chamberlain stood in her daughter's pristine bedroom, her hands trembling as she took in the evidence of Victoria's hasty departure the previous evening. The elegant dress Victoria had planned to wear to the rehearsal dinner hung carefully in the closet, her wedding shoes were neatly arranged beneath it, and her Bibles, both her daily devotional copy and the ornate white leather one she had chosen for the ceremony, sat undisturbed on her bedside table. Theodore. Catherine called out, her voice carrying the sharp edge of panic that only a mother's intuition can produce. Something's wrong. Victoria never came home last night. Theodore Chamberlain rushed up the grand staircase, still wearing his silk pajamas and monogrammed robe. At 58, he was accustomed to handling crises in the oil business with calm efficiency, but the thought of his beloved daughter in danger sent his blood pressure soaring. "Are you certain she didn't come in late and leave early for some wedding preparation?" he asked, though even as he spoke the words, he knew they rang false. Victoria was meticulous about communication and would never have worried her parents unnecessarily. "Her bed hasn't been touched," Catherine replied, pulling back the carefully arranged duvet to show the undisturbed pillows. "And look, her evening purse is missing, but her regular handbag is here with her car keys." Theodore, she had no way to get home if something happened to Amanda's plans. Theodore immediately went to the telephone in Victoria's room and dialed Amanda Montgomery's number. The phone rang 6 times before Amanda's groggy voice answered. "Hello. Amanda, this is Theodore Chamberlain. Is Victoria with you?" There was a long pause before Amanda replied, and Theodore could hear something strange in her voice, a combination of exhaustion and what sounded like guilt. "Mr. Chamberlain, Victoria, we had an argument last night. She left the River Oaks Country Club around 11:30, and I haven't seen her since. I thought she would call someone to pick her up or take a taxi home." "An argument?" Theodore's voice was sharp. "What kind of argument? And why didn't you make sure she got home safely?" Another pause. "It was a personal matter, sir. I can't really explain over the phone. But Mr. Chamberlain, you need to know that Victoria was very upset when she left. I'm worried about her too." Theodore felt ice forming in his stomach. Victoria rarely argued with anyone, and the idea of her leaving a social event alone and upset was completely out of character. "Amanda, I want you to come over here immediately. We're calling the police, and they'll want to speak with you about Victoria's state of mind and the circumstances of her departure." Within an hour, the Chamberlain mansion was bustling with activity. Detective Robert Martinez of the Houston Police Department had arrived with his partner, Detective Susan Chen, and they had set up a command center in Theodore's study. Amanda Montgomery sat in the living room with Catherine Chamberlain, both women clutching coffee cups with shaking hands. "Mrs. Montgomery," Detective Martinez began, his tone professional but gentle, "I need you to take me through exactly what happened last night, from the time you picked Victoria up until the time she left the country club." Amanda had clearly spent the early morning hours preparing for this conversation, but she still struggled to maintain her composure as she recounted the evening's events. She described the dinner at Le Jardin, the move to River Oaks Country Club, and the confrontation with Bradley Crawford, but she deliberately omitted any mention of her affair with Jonathan or the conversation about Victoria's upcoming marriage. "You said you and Victoria had an argument," Detective Chen interjected. "Can you be more specific about the nature of this disagreement?" Amanda's carefully constructed story began to crumble under the detective's gentle but persistent questioning. "It was about the wedding. Victoria was having some last-minute doubts about getting married, and I was trying to help her work through her feelings." "What kind of doubts?" Detective Martinez asked. "Just normal pre-wedding jitters," Amanda said quickly. "You know how it is. She was wondering if she was too young, if she was ready for such a big commitment. I was trying to reassure her that what she was feeling was perfectly normal." Theodore had been listening to the conversation from the doorway, and he stepped forward with a frown. "That doesn't sound like Victoria at all. She's been looking forward to marrying Jonathan for months. Just yesterday morning, she was talking about how blessed she felt to have found such a godly man to share her life with." Amanda's face flushed, and she avoided making eye contact with Theodore. "Sometimes people present a confident facade even when they're struggling internally, Mr. Chamberlain. Victoria didn't want to disappoint you and Mrs. Chamberlain by admitting she was having second thoughts." Detective Chen made notes in her notepad, but her expression suggested she sensed there was more to the story. "Mrs. Montgomery, when Victoria left the club, was she alone?" Did anyone see which direction she went? She was alone when she walked out the rear exit, Amanda confirmed. I tried to follow her to make sure she was all right, but she said she wanted to be by herself. I should have insisted on driving her home, but I thought she just needed some air and would come back inside. Did you see her leave the parking lot? Did she get into a vehicle with anyone? Amanda hesitated before answering. I saw her walking toward the street, but I went back inside to get her purse, which she had left at our table. When I came back outside a few minutes later, she was gone. Detective Martinez exchanged a glance with his partner. Mrs. Montgomery, forgive me for asking, but had Victoria been drinking alcohol last night? Was her judgment possibly impaired? No, Amanda said firmly. Victoria doesn't drink. She had sparkling water with dinner and nothing alcoholic at the club. She was upset, but she was thinking clearly. As the detectives continued their questioning, Jonathan Westbrook arrived at the Chamberlain mansion. He had been informed of Victoria's disappearance by his own parents, who had received a call from Catherine Chamberlain earlier that morning. Jonathan's appearance was impeccable as always, wearing a navy blue suit and looking every inch the concerned fiancé. But those who knew him well might have noticed the slight tremor in his hands and the way he avoided direct eye contact when discussing Victoria. Detective Martinez, Jonathan said as he was introduced to the investigating officers, I want you to know that I'll do anything necessary to help find Victoria. She means everything to me, and the thought of her out there somewhere, possibly in danger, is killing me. Mr. Westbrook, Detective Chen said, consulting her notes, when did you last speak with Victoria? Yesterday morning, Jonathan replied without hesitation. I called her around 10 o'clock to confirm the time for tonight's rehearsal dinner. She was excited about the bachelorette party and looking forward to seeing Amanda and her friends. How did she seem during that conversation? Was she anxious about the wedding or concerned about anything? Jonathan appeared to consider the question carefully. She seemed perfectly normal. Happy, excited, maybe a little nervous about all the wedding preparations, but nothing unusual. She told me she loved me and couldn't wait to be my wife. Amanda flinched slightly when Jonathan described Victoria's loving words, but the detectives were focused on his response and didn't notice her reaction. Mr. Westbrook, Detective Martinez continued, Mrs. Montgomery mentioned that Victoria was experiencing some pre-wedding doubts last night. Did she share any concerns with you in recent weeks? Jonathan shook his head emphatically. Absolutely not. Victoria was completely committed to our marriage. She's been involved in every detail of the wedding planning, and she's talked extensively about our future together. If she was having doubts, she certainly didn't share them with me. Theodore Chamberlain had been observing both Jonathan and Amanda during the questioning, and his years of business experience had taught him to read people carefully. Something about their responses wasn't sitting right with him, though he couldn't put his finger on exactly what was bothering him. Detective Martinez, Theodore said, what are the next steps in the investigation? Do we organize search parties? Contact hospitals? Issue a public appeal for information? All of those things, Mr. Chamberlain, Detective Martinez replied. We've already sent Victoria's description and photograph to all area hospitals and police departments. We'll be canvassing the area around River Oaks Country Club to see if anyone saw her after she left the building. And we'll need to examine her bedroom and personal belongings to see if there are any clues about her state of mind or possible destinations. As the detectives began their systematic search of Victoria's bedroom, they discovered something that Amanda had not mentioned, Victoria's private journal, hidden in a locked drawer of her antique writing desk. The most recent entries provided a stark contrast to the picture of a happy, confident bride-to-be that Jonathan had painted. March 15, 1998, I had lunch with Amanda today, and something felt different about her. She asked a lot of questions about Jonathan and our relationship, but not in the supportive way she usually does. Her questions felt almost probing. Maybe I'm being paranoid, but I got the sense that she was fishing for information about problems in our relationship. When I told her how happy I am with Jonathan, she seemed almost disappointed. I'm probably reading too much into it, but I've been praying for wisdom about how to handle the dynamics between my fiancé and my best friend after we're married. April 2, 1998, Jonathan was supposed to take me to dinner tonight, but he cancelled at the last minute, saying he had to work late on an important client presentation. When I drove by his office around 9 o'clock to surprise him with coffee, the building was dark and his car wasn't in the parking lot. I called Amanda to see if she wanted to grab a late dinner, but her roommate said she was out on a date and wouldn't be back until late. I'm sure there's an innocent explanation, but I felt a strange knot in my stomach driving home alone. April 10, 1998, 8 more days until the wedding, and I should be completely joyful, but I'm struggling with some troubling thoughts. Jonathan has been distant lately, and when I try to talk to him about it, he says I'm being overly sensitive. He's been working late frequently, and when he is with me, he seems distracted. I've been praying that God would reveal to me if there's something wrong or if I'm just experiencing normal pre-wedding anxiety. I love Jonathan so much, and I want our marriage to honor God, but I need wisdom about how to address these concerns. Detective Chin showed the journal entries to her partner, and both officers recognized the significance of what they were reading. Victoria had been having relationship concerns in the weeks leading up to her disappearance, despite Jonathan's claims that everything was perfect between them. Mr. Westbrook, Detective Martinez said, returning to the living room where Jonathan was waiting with the Chamberlains and Amanda, "We've found Victoria's private journal, and it indicates that she had some concerns about your relationship in recent weeks. She mentions you canceling dates and seeming distant. Can you help us understand what might have been causing her to feel that way?" Jonathan's face went pale, and he glanced quickly at Amanda before responding. Well, yes, I have been working longer hours lately. My firm is considering me for a promotion to partner, and I've been putting in extra time to prove myself. I didn't realize Victoria was feeling neglected. If I had known she was upset about my work schedule, I would have made adjustments immediately. She also mentions driving by your office one evening when you said you were working late, but finding the building dark and your car gone. Can you explain that? Jonathan's hands began to tremble slightly. There must be some misunderstanding. Maybe she went to the wrong building, or maybe I was in a different part of the office complex. I can check my calendar and time sheets to verify where I was on any specific date. Theodore Chamberlain was watching Jonathan's reaction carefully, and his suspicions were growing stronger by the minute. "Jonathan," he said quietly, "is there anything you need to tell us about your relationship with Victoria? Anything that might help us understand why she left the club alone and upset last night?" Jonathan looked around the room at the faces staring at him expectantly, and for a moment, it seemed as though he might confess something significant. But instead, he straightened his shoulders and met Theodore's gaze directly. "Mr. Chamberlain, I love your daughter with all my heart. Yes, I've been working long hours, and maybe I haven't been as attentive as I should have been in recent weeks. But I would never do anything to hurt Victoria, and I certainly don't know why she would disappear the night before our wedding." Amanda had been sitting silently during this exchange, but the stress of maintaining her deception was clearly taking its toll. Her hands were shaking, and she kept glancing toward the door as if she wanted to escape. "Mrs. Montgomery," Detective Chin said, turning her attention back to Amanda, "is there anything else about last night that you haven't told us? Anything that might help us understand Victoria's state of mind when she left?" Amanda took a deep breath, and for a moment, it seemed as though she might reveal the truth about her affair with Jonathan and the confrontation that had driven Victoria away. But instead, she simply said, "I think Victoria was more overwhelmed by the wedding preparations than any of us realized. She's always been a perfectionist, and the pressure of such a large, elaborate wedding might have been more than she could handle." The detective spent the rest of the morning interviewing other members of the bachelorette party, club staff who had been working the previous evening, and anyone else who might have seen Victoria after she left River Oaks Country Club. But despite their thorough investigation, no significant leads emerged. Sarah Beth Williams and Rebecca Grace Miller, the two women from Victoria's Bible study group who had attended the bachelorette party, provided the most helpful information. They confirmed that Victoria had been uncomfortable with the atmosphere at the club and had seemed distressed after her private conversation with Amanda on the terrace. Victoria was crying when she came back inside, Sarah Beth told the detectives. She looked like someone had told her something devastating. We asked if she wanted us to take her home, but Amanda said they needed to work through whatever had upset her. Did you hear any of the conversation between Victoria and Mrs. Montgomery? Detective Martinez asked. No, they were outside on the terrace, and we stayed inside to give them privacy, Rebecca replied. But when they came back in, both of them looked like they had been crying. And Victoria seemed almost betrayed. Like someone had hurt her very deeply. This information contradicted Amanda's claim that the argument had been about normal pre-wedding jitters, and the detectives made note of the discrepancy. As the day wore on and no trace of Victoria was found, the decision was made to postpone the wedding indefinitely. The Chamberlain and Westbrook families spent a painful afternoon calling hundreds of guests, vendors, and out-of-town relatives to inform them of Victoria's disappearance and the cancellation of what was to have been Houston's social event of the year. The Houston Chronicle ran a front-page story about the missing heiress, complete with photographs from Victoria's engagement announcement and details about the elaborate wedding that had been called off. The story attracted national attention, and by evening, news crews from several television networks had gathered outside the Chamberlain mansion. The family of Victoria Elizabeth Chamberlain is asking for the public's help in locating their daughter, who disappeared Friday night after leaving River Oaks Country Club, reporter Janet Morrison told the Channel 2 news cameras. Victoria is 28 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, with blonde hair and green eyes. She was last seen wearing a white silk blouse and black evening pants. Anyone with information about her whereabouts is asked to contact the Houston Police Department immediately. As the media coverage intensified, tips began pouring into the police department. People reported seeing young blonde women at bus stations, airports, hotels, and restaurants throughout the Houston area. Each lead had to be investigated, but none of them led to Victoria. On Sunday morning, April 20th, the day that should have been Victoria's wedding, Pastor William Henderson of First Presbyterian Church of Magnolia Springs addressed his congregation about the situation. Brothers and sisters, Pastor Henderson said from the pulpit where Victoria should have been standing in her wedding gown, we gather this morning with heavy hearts, praying for our sister Victoria Chamberlain and her family. We don't understand why God has allowed this trial to come into their lives, but we trust that He is sovereign even in our darkest moments. The congregation, which included many friends and family members who would have been celebrating Victoria's wedding, wept openly as Pastor Henderson led them in prayer for Victoria's safe return. Heavenly Father, the pastor prayed, you know where Victoria is at this moment. You see her circumstances, her needs, and her heart. We ask that you would protect her from harm, comfort her if she is afraid, and guide those who are searching for her. Help us to trust you even when we cannot understand your ways, and give the Chamberlain family strength to endure this trial. Meanwhile, at New Hope Community Church on the other side of Houston, Pastor David Williams was concluding his morning service when a young woman in the back pew stood up during the invitation hymn. She was wearing the same clothes she had worn Friday night, now wrinkled and stained, and her blonde hair was disheveled from 2 nights of sleeping on church pews. Pastor Williams, Victoria said, her voice barely audible above the organ music, I need to talk to you. I need help. Pastor Williams immediately recognized the young woman who had been praying in his sanctuary for 2 days, though he had respected her need for privacy and hadn't pressed for details about her situation. Now, seeing her obvious distress and the condition of her appearance, he realized she was in serious trouble. Of course, dear, Pastor Williams said gently. Let's go to my office where we can talk privately. As the congregation continued singing, Just As I Am, Pastor Williams led Victoria to his small office behind the sanctuary. The room was simple and comforting, with bookshelves lined with theological texts, a wooden desk covered with sermon notes, and 2 comfortable chairs positioned near a window that looked out on a small garden. Now then, Pastor Williams said once they were seated, why don't you tell me what's troubling you? Victoria began to cry as she attempted to explain her situation. Pastor Williams, I need to call my parents and tell them I'm safe, but I'm not ready to go home yet. I'm not ready to face everything that's waiting for me there. Are you in some kind of danger? Pastor Williams asked with concern. No, not physical danger, Victoria replied. But my whole life has fallen apart, and I don't know how to put it back together. I found out Friday night that my fiancée has been having an affair with my best friend, and that they were planning to steal from my family after our wedding. I was supposed to get married today, but instead, I'm sitting here in clothes I've been wearing for 3 days, with no idea what to do next. Pastor Williams listened with compassion as Victoria poured out the entire story of Friday night's revelations, her flight from the country club, and her 2 days of prayer and soul-searching in his sanctuary. I keep asking God why he allowed this to happen, Victoria said through her tears. I thought Jonathan was his choice for my husband. I thought I was being wise and patient, waiting for a godly man who would help me serve the Lord better. Now I feel like my judgment is completely flawed, and I don't know how to trust God's guidance anymore. Pastor Williams handed Victoria a box of tissues and allowed her to compose herself before responding. Victoria, he said gently, sometimes God protects us from making terrible mistakes by allowing painful truths to be revealed at exactly the right time. If you had married Jonathan without knowing about his character flaws, you might have spent years or even decades in a marriage built on deception and betrayal. But why did it have to happen this way? Victoria asked. Why couldn't God have shown me Jonathan's true nature months ago, before all the wedding preparations, before I fell so deeply in love with him? I don't know the answer to that question, Pastor Williams admitted. But I do know that God's timing is always perfect, even when it doesn't feel that way to us. Perhaps you needed to go through this experience to learn something about yourself, or about God's faithfulness, or about his plan for your future. Victoria considered his words carefully. Pastor Williams, I've been praying here for 2 days, and I keep feeling like God is trying to tell me something. Not about Jonathan or Amanda, but about my own life and the way I've been living it. What do you think he's trying to show you? Victoria was quiet for a long moment before answering. I think I've been living in a bubble. I grew up with so much privilege and protection that I never learned to recognize evil when it was right in front of me. I trusted people because they said the right things and came from the right families, but I never looked at their actual character or behavior. Pastor Williams nodded thoughtfully. That's a mature observation, Victoria. Many people go through their entire lives without learning that lesson. I also think, Victoria continued, that I may have been more committed to the idea of being married than I was to actually knowing Jonathan as a person. I was so excited about having a Christian husband and starting a family that I ignored the signs that something wasn't right in our relationship. What signs did you ignore? Victoria thought back over the past few months, remembering details that had troubled her at the time but that she had dismissed as unimportant. He never wanted to pray with me unless other people were around. He was always vague about his personal relationship with God. He supported my charitable work, but he never participated in it himself. And lately, he had been encouraging me to be less involved with the church and more focused on social activities that would benefit his career. Those are significant concerns, Pastor Williams agreed. A truly godly man would want to pray with you privately, would be eager to share his own spiritual journey, and would encourage your service to others rather than trying to redirect your attention to worldly pursuits. Victoria felt a weight lifting from her shoulders as she spoke openly about her relationship with Jonathan for the first time. Pastor Williams, I think I need to go home and face my family, but I also think I need to make some major changes in my life. I can't keep living in the sheltered world where I grew up. I need to learn how to discern people's true characters, and I need to find ways to serve God that don't depend on having a husband to validate my ministry. Pastor Williams smiled. Those sound like the beginnings of wisdom, dear. And you don't have to make all those changes immediately. God will guide you step by step as you seek His will for your life. Before Victoria called her parents, Pastor Williams offered to contact them first to let them know she was safe and to prepare them for her eventual homecoming. He explained that Victoria needed a little more time to process her situation and plan her next steps, but that she would be home within a few hours. Theodore Chamberlain broke down in tears when he received Pastor Williams' call. "Thank God she's safe," he said, his voice choked with emotion. We've been praying non-stop since Friday night. Can you tell me, is she all right? Has someone hurt her? She's been through a very difficult emotional experience, Pastor Williams explained carefully, but she hasn't been physically harmed. She's been safe here at the church, praying and seeking God's guidance about some serious problems in her personal relationships. Problems? What kind of problems? Pastor Williams chose his words carefully, not wanting to violate Victoria's privacy but also understanding that her parents needed some explanation for her disappearance. Mr. Chamberlain, I think it would be best if Victoria explains the situation to you herself when she comes home. What I can tell you is that she discovered some very troubling information about people she trusted, and she needed time to pray and think about how to respond. When Victoria finally returned to the Chamberlain mansion on Sunday afternoon, she was greeted by a house full of worried family members, relieved friends, and law enforcement officers who needed to close their missing person case. The media crews outside the house created a circus atmosphere that Victoria found overwhelming after 2 days of peaceful solitude. Detective Martinez and Detective Chen interviewed Victoria extensively about her whereabouts since Friday night and the circumstances that had led to her disappearance. Victoria told them about her discovery of Jonathan's affair with Amanda and the confrontation that had driven her to flee the country club, but she asked them to handle the information discreetly. Mr. Westbrook and Mrs. Montgomery committed adultery, but I don't think that's a criminal matter for the police, Victoria explained. However, Jonathan did mention plans to steal from my trust fund after our marriage, which might be relevant to your investigation. The detectives took detailed notes about Jonathan's alleged financial crimes, but they explained that proving intent to commit fraud would be difficult without more concrete evidence. Miss Chamberlain, Detective Chen said, do you want to press any charges against Mr. Westbrook or Mrs. Montgomery for their role in your emotional distress and the resources that were expended searching for you? Victoria considered the question carefully. Detective Chen, what I want most is for the truth to be known and for people to understand that my disappearance wasn't a publicity stunt or an attempt to hurt my family. But I don't think criminal charges are appropriate. The pain they caused me is more of a spiritual and emotional matter than a legal one. After the police interviews were completed, Victoria faced the difficult task of explaining the situation to her parents. Theodore and Catherine Chamberlain listened in shocked silence as their daughter described Amanda's betrayal and Jonathan's callous manipulation. I can't believe it, Catherine said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've known Amanda since she was a little girl. I watched her grow up alongside you, Victoria. How could she do something so cruel? And Jonathan, Theodore added, his business instincts taking over as he processed the implications of his daughter's story. I trusted him with your future, with our family's reputation. If he was planning to defraud us, there could be serious legal and financial consequences. Victoria had been dreading this conversation, but she felt a sense of relief as she finally shared the burden she had been carrying alone. Daddy, I know this reflects poorly on my judgment. I should have been more discerning about the people I trusted. I should have paid attention to the warning signs that something was wrong. Theodore reached over and took his daughter's hands in his. Victoria, you are not responsible for other people's deception and betrayal. You trusted people who presented themselves as trustworthy, and you loved people who claimed to love you. The fault lies with them, not with you. But even as her parents offered comfort and support, Victoria knew that the consequences of Friday night's revelations would extend far beyond her immediate family. Jonathan and Amanda were both prominent members of Houston society, and news of their affair and its role in the canceled wedding would spread quickly through their social circles. Over the following weeks, the story of Victoria's disappearance and the reasons behind it became the subject of intense gossip throughout Houston's elite communities. Some people sympathized with Victoria and praised her for having the courage to call off a fraudulent marriage. Others criticized her for creating a public spectacle and embarrassing two respected families. Jonathan Westbrook initially tried to deny the affair and claimed that Victoria had misunderstood innocent interactions between himself and Amanda. But when confronted with specific details that only someone with intimate knowledge of their relationship could have known, he eventually admitted to the affair while claiming it had been a brief lapse in judgment rather than the ongoing relationship Victoria had described. Amanda Montgomery, meanwhile, had disappeared from Houston society almost as completely as Victoria had disappeared from the country club. Her family confirmed that she had left town for an extended visit with relatives, but rumors suggested that she had fled to Europe to avoid the social consequences of her role in the scandal. The Westbrook family attempted to salvage their reputation by suggesting that Jonathan had been seduced by Amanda and that he had genuinely loved Victoria despite his momentary weakness. They even proposed that the wedding could be rescheduled after a period of counseling and reconciliation. But Victoria had no interest in reconciliation. Her 2 days of prayer and reflection at New Hope Community Church had convinced her that God was calling her to a different path, one that didn't involve marriage to Jonathan Westbrook or continued participation in the superficial social world where she had grown up. I realize now that I was more in love with the idea of being married than I was with Jonathan as a person, Victoria told her parents during one of their many conversations about her future. I wanted so badly to have a godly husband and a Christian family that I ignored the evidence that Jonathan wasn't the man I thought he was. Instead of planning a rescheduled wedding, Victoria began planning a completely different kind of life. She enrolled in graduate courses in social work at the University of Houston, with the goal of working directly with people in need rather than simply writing checks to charitable organizations. She also became a regular volunteer at New Hope Community Church, where Pastor Williams had welcomed her as a member of their small but vibrant congregation. The contrast between New Hope's authenticity and the formality of First Presbyterian was striking, and Victoria found herself drawn to the honest faith and genuine community she encountered there. At New Hope, Victoria explained to her concerned mother, "People don't care about my family's money or social status. They care about my heart and my relationship with God. It's the first time in my life that I've felt like people were getting to know the real me instead of just the image I've always presented." Theodore and Catherine struggled to understand their daughter's dramatic life changes, but they couldn't argue with the peace and purpose they saw in her as she pursued her new direction. Victoria seemed more genuinely happy working with homeless families and troubled teenagers than she had ever been planning charity galas and society weddings. As 1998 drew to a close, Victoria had settled into her new life with a sense of contentment she had never experienced before. She was excelling in her graduate studies, making meaningful friendships with people from all walks of life, and discovering spiritual gifts she had never known she possessed. But even as Victoria found healing and purpose in her new direction, the questions surrounding Jonathan and Amanda's disappearance from Houston society continued to circulate. Some people wondered if there had been more to their relationship than a simple affair. Others speculated about whether Jonathan's alleged plans for financial fraud had extended beyond just Victoria's trust fund. The Houston Police Department had quietly investigated Jonathan's business dealings in the months following Victoria's disappearance, but they had found no concrete evidence of criminal activity. Jonathan's firm had confirmed that he had indeed been working longer hours in pursuit of a partnership, and his financial records showed no unusual transactions or unexplained wealth. Amanda's sudden departure from Houston remained a mystery, but since she was an adult who had left voluntarily, the police had no grounds to investigate her whereabouts. Her family maintained that she was taking time to reassess her life priorities, and would return to Houston when she was ready. As the years passed, Victoria's story became part of Houston folklore, the tale of the heiress who disappeared on the eve of her wedding and emerged as a social worker dedicated to helping the city's most vulnerable residents. But those who knew Victoria personally understood that her real transformation had been spiritual rather than professional. "I learned that God sometimes protects us by allowing painful truths to be revealed at exactly the right time," Victoria often told the young women she counseled at the crisis center where she worked. "What felt like the worst thing that could happen to me turned out to be God's way of saving me from a life built on lies." By 2003, 5 years after her dramatic disappearance, Victoria Chamberlain had become one of Houston's most respected social workers and a powerful advocate for victims of domestic violence and financial abuse. Her work had earned recognition from both religious and secular organizations, and she had been invited to speak at conferences throughout Texas about faith-based approaches to social justice. But despite her professional success and personal growth, Victoria had never completely put the events of April 1998 behind her. She still wondered about Amanda's whereabouts and whether her former friend had ever found peace with the choices she had made. And she occasionally heard rumors about Jonathan, who had eventually left Houston and moved to Dallas, where he had married a wealthy widow and resumed his career in investment banking. Victoria's life had been rebuilt on a foundation of authentic faith and genuine service to others, but she sometimes felt as though there were still unresolved chapters in her story. She had forgiven Amanda and Jonathan for their betrayal, but she had never had the opportunity to offer that forgiveness directly or to understand what had driven them to make such destructive choices. Little did Victoria know that the answers to her lingering questions were hidden in Amanda Montgomery's empty Magnolia Springs mansion, where they would remain undiscovered for another decade. On a crisp October morning in 2013, exactly 15 years after Victoria Chamberlain's wedding day that never was, a small crew of contractors arrived at 2847 Magnolia Lane in the heart of Magnolia Springs' most exclusive neighborhood. The sprawling Georgian-style mansion had stood empty for over a decade, its windows boarded up and its once immaculate gardens overgrown with weeds and volunteer trees that spoke of years of neglect. Margaret "Maggie" O'Sullivan, an energetic real estate developer in her early 40s, stood on the circular driveway surveying the property with both excitement and trepidation. She had purchased the Montgomery estate at a tax auction 6 months earlier, despite dire warnings from other developers about the property's troubled history and the challenges of renovating a house that had been abandoned for so long. Mrs. O'Sullivan called out Frank Rodriguez, the contractor she had hired to oversee the renovation. "Are you sure you want to start with the interior demo today? We could focus on the exterior work first, get the landscaping cleaned up and the roof repairs completed before we tackle what's inside." Maggie shook her head decisively. "Frank, I've been waiting 6 months to see what's inside this house. Besides, we need to assess the structural integrity and electrical systems before we can make any real progress on the exterior renovations." The Montgomery mansion had been the subject of local speculation and urban legends for years. Amanda Grace Montgomery had purchased the property in 2005 with a substantial inheritance from her grandmother, but neighbors reported that she had rarely been seen there after 2007. The house had been maintained by a landscaping service and cleaning crew for several years, but even those services had been discontinued by 2009. Various theories circulated about why Amanda had abandoned such a valuable property. Some people believed she had died and her family simply hadn't bothered to deal with the estate. Others suggested that she had fled the country to avoid financial or legal troubles. A few persistent rumors claimed that Amanda had never actually left Houston at all, but had become a recluse who lived somewhere else in the city under an assumed name. The property had eventually been seized by Harris County for unpaid taxes, despite its multimillion-dollar value. Attempts to contact Amanda or her family members had been unsuccessful, and the legal process of taking possession had dragged on for years due to the complexity of tracking down all potential heirs and creditors. Maggie had been drawn to the property not just because of its excellent bones and prime location, but also because she was intrigued by the mystery surrounding its abandonment. As a successful developer who specialized in historic renovations, she had worked on dozens of properties with unusual histories, but the Montgomery mansion felt different somehow. "All right, team," Frank called out to his crew as they unloaded their tools and equipment, "remember that this house has been sealed up for years. We need to be careful about air quality, potential mold issues, and structural surprises. Take your time and call out anything unusual." The front door of the mansion was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, featuring hand-carved panels and beveled glass inserts that reflected the morning sunlight in prismatic patterns. When Frank inserted the key that the county had provided, the lock turned easily despite the years of disuse. As the door swung open, Maggie felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather. The foyer was enormous, with a sweeping staircase that curved upward to a second-floor landing illuminated by a crystal chandelier that was covered in dust but still magnificent. The air inside was stale and heavy, carrying scents of old furniture polish, faded perfume, and something else that Maggie couldn't identify. The electricity was turned off years ago, Frank noted, consulting his clipboard, but the gas and water were disconnected more recently. Probably when the county took possession. As they moved through the house, Maggie was struck by the eerie sense that Amanda Montgomery had simply vanished in the middle of living her life. The furniture was still in place, covered with white sheets that had accumulated years of dust. Personal belongings were scattered throughout the rooms as if their owner had stepped out for a few hours rather than disappearing for over a decade. In the formal living room, a grand piano held framed photographs that showed Amanda at various social events throughout the early 2000s. Maggie recognized some of the faces from Houston society pages, including several prominent business leaders and politicians who had been regular fixtures at charity galas and fundraising events. "Look at this," said Carmen Silva, one of the crew members, pointing to a desk in the corner of the living room. "There are still letters and bills here from 2007. It's like time stopped in this house." Frank examined the mail that Carmen had discovered. "These are all addressed to Amanda Montgomery, and some of them have never been opened. Bills from utility companies, bank statements, even what looks like Christmas cards." As they continued their exploration, the sense of interrupted life became even stronger. In the kitchen, dishes were still in the dishwasher, clean but covered with years of dust. The refrigerator had been emptied and cleaned, but the cabinets were stocked with non-perishable foods that had expiration dates from 2007 and 2008. "It's like she planned to be gone for a few days and just never came back," Maggie observed, running her finger along the dusty granite countertop. The master bedroom on the second floor was the most unsettling room of all. The bed was made with expensive linens that had yellowed with age, and the walk-in closet was full of designer clothing that still hung on padded hangers. An ornate jewelry box on the dresser contained pieces that Maggie estimated were worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Why would someone abandon all of this? Carmen wondered aloud. "These clothes alone are worth more than I make in a year." But it was in Amanda's home office that they made the discovery that would change everything. The room was located on the first floor, behind the kitchen, and had been designed as a private retreat where Amanda could manage her personal affairs and correspondence. Frank had been examining the built-in bookshelves that lined one wall of the office when he noticed that one section didn't quite align with the others. "Maggie, come take a look at this. Does this bookshelf look different to you?" Maggie studied the wall carefully. "It does look like that section might have been added or modified at some point. See how the wood grain doesn't match perfectly, and the spacing between the shelves is slightly different. Should we take a closer look?" Frank asked. "It might be hiding old electrical work or plumbing that we need to know about for the renovation." "Absolutely. Let's see what's behind there." Frank and two other crew members carefully removed the books from the suspect section of shelving and examined the construction more closely. What they found was a hidden panel that had been skillfully concealed to look like part of the original built-in cabinetry. "This is high-quality work," Frank noted as he probed the edges of the panel. "Someone put a lot of effort into making this secret compartment invisible." Using a pry bar, Frank carefully worked to open the hidden panel without damaging the surrounding woodwork. After several minutes of patient effort, the panel swung inward on concealed hinges, revealing a cavity that was approximately 2 feet wide, 3 feet tall, and 18 inches deep. Inside the hidden compartment was a weathered leather satchel that looked as though it had been expensive when new but had aged considerably over the years. The bag was secured with a combination lock that had tarnished with time. "Should we open it?" Carmen asked, her voice reflecting the tension that everyone in the room was feeling. Maggie hesitated for a moment, understanding that whatever was inside the bag might have been hidden for good reason. But her curiosity and her legal right as the property owner ultimately overcame her caution. "Frank, do you have any bolt cutters in your truck?" It took only a few minutes to cut through the old lock, and when Maggie opened the leather satchel, she found contents that left her speechless. Inside were dozens of documents, photographs, and what appeared to be personal letters, all organized in manila folders with careful labeling in Amanda Montgomery's distinctive handwriting. The first folder was labeled Victoria, Evidence of Jay's Deception, and contained photographs that made Maggie's stomach turn. The images showed Jonathan Westbrook in intimate situations with Amanda, taken in various locations around Houston during the spring of 1998. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and even airline tickets documented a secret relationship that had been ongoing for months before Victoria's disappearance. But the most shocking discovery was in a folder labeled Jonathan's Plan, Financial Fraud Documentation. This folder contained photocopies of financial documents that appeared to show Jonathan Westbrook's systematic embezzlement from his investment firm's client accounts, including detailed plans for accessing Victoria Chamberlain's trust fund after their marriage. "My God," Maggie whispered as she examined the documents. This woman was documenting criminal activity. At the bottom of the satchel was a thick envelope sealed with wax and labeled, "To be opened only in case of my death, Amanda Grace Montgomery, June 15, 2007. Maggie's hands were shaking as she carefully broke the wax seal and removed the contents of the envelope. Inside was a handwritten confession that was dated June 15, 2007, nearly 10 years after the events it described. "If someone is reading this," the confession began, "it means that I am dead and that my conscience has finally been silenced. For 9 years, I have carried the burden of knowing the truth about what happened to Victoria Elizabeth Chamberlain, and I can no longer bear the weight of my guilt and deception." Maggie continued reading, her heart pounding as the full scope of Amanda's revelations became clear. Victoria did not disappear of her own accord on April 18, 1998. She was murdered by Jonathan Alexander Westbrook with my knowledge and assistance. The story of her walking away from River Oaks Country Club after our argument was a lie that Jonathan and I constructed to cover up our crime. The confession went on to describe in horrifying detail how Victoria had confronted Jonathan and Amanda about their affair, and how Jonathan had convinced Amanda to help him eliminate Victoria rather than face the exposure of his financial crimes and the ruin of his reputation. Jonathan told me that Victoria threatened to expose not only our affair but also his embezzlement from the firm, Amanda had written. He said that she had evidence that would send him to prison and destroy both of our families. In my fear and selfishness, I agreed to help him silence her permanently. According to the confession, Victoria had not left the country club alone as Amanda had told police. Instead, Jonathan had been waiting in the parking lot, and together he and Amanda had convinced Victoria to get into his car by claiming they wanted to drive her home safely. "We told Victoria that we wanted to take her somewhere private where we could explain everything and work out a solution that wouldn't hurt anyone," Amanda's confession continued. But Jonathan had already decided that the only solution was Victoria's death. The document described how they had driven Victoria to a remote area outside Houston, where Jonathan had strangled her during what was supposed to be a conversation about their situation. Amanda claimed that she had not known Jonathan intended to kill Victoria until it was too late to stop him. "I will never forget the look in Victoria's eyes when she realized what was happening," Amanda had written. "She looked at me with such pain and betrayal, and I knew that I had destroyed not only her life but my own soul." Jonathan said we had no choice, that Victoria would never have kept our secrets, but I knew that we had chosen evil over repentance. The confession detailed how they had disposed of Victoria's body in a location that Amanda described only as, "where the earth is soft and the trees are old," and how they had returned to Houston to begin the elaborate deception that had convinced everyone that Victoria had simply run away. "For 9 years, I have been haunted by what we did," the confession concluded. "I see Victoria's face in my dreams, and I hear her voice asking me why I betrayed her. I have tried to live with the knowledge that I helped murder the best person I ever knew, but I cannot carry this burden any longer. If I am dead when this confession is found, please know that I deserve whatever judgment God has given me. And please find Victoria's body so that her family can finally lay her to rest with the honor she deserves." Maggie felt nauseated as she finished reading Amanda's confession. The woman she had known only as a mysterious former socialite had been confessing to murder, and the beautiful Victoria Chamberlain, whose charity work and social justice advocacy had made her a beloved figure in Houston, had been killed by the two people she had trusted most. "Frank," Maggie called out, her voice shaking, "we need to call the police immediately. This isn't just a renovation project anymore. It's a crime scene." Detective Michael Foster of the Houston Police Department's Cold Case Division received the call about Amanda Montgomery's confession on a gray October afternoon that would forever change his perspective on the power of hidden truth to emerge after years of concealment. At 45 years old, Foster had worked hundreds of unsolved cases during his 20-year career, but the Victoria Chamberlain disappearance had always haunted him in a particularly personal way. Foster had been a young patrol officer in 1998 when Victoria vanished, and he had participated in the massive search efforts that had consumed Houston law enforcement for months. He remembered the grief-stricken faces of Theodore and Catherine Chamberlain as they pleaded with the media for any information about their daughter's whereabouts. He also remembered the strange behavior of Jonathan Westbrook and Amanda Montgomery during the investigation, though at the time he hadn't been senior enough to pursue his suspicions. "Detective Foster," the dispatcher's voice crackled through his radio, "we need you at 2847, Magnolia Lane in Magnolia Springs. A renovation crew has discovered what appears to be evidence related to the Victoria Chamberlain case." Foster's pulse quickened as he acknowledged the call and began the drive to Magnolia Springs. The Victoria Chamberlain case had been officially reclassified as a cold case in 2003, 5 years after her disappearance, but Foster had never stopped believing that someday the truth would emerge. He had reviewed the case files countless times over the years, always feeling that there had been something fundamentally dishonest about the original investigation. When Foster arrived at the Montgomery mansion, he found Maggie O'Sullivan and her renovation crew waiting on the front porch, all of them visibly shaken by what they had discovered. Maggie handed him the leather satchel and Amanda's confession with hands that were still trembling from shock. "Detective Foster," Maggie said, "I need you to know that we didn't go looking for any of this. We were just trying to assess the property for renovation when we found the hidden compartment. I've read enough of these documents to know that this is evidence of serious crimes." Foster carefully reviewed Amanda's confession, and as he read, he felt the pieces of a 15-year-old puzzle finally clicking into place. The strange inconsistencies in Amanda and Jonathan's original statements, the suspicious timing of their departures from Houston, the lack of any credible sightings of Victoria after she allegedly left the country club, all of it made sense now. "Mrs. O'Sullivan," Foster said as he finished reading, "you and your crew have just helped solve one of Houston's most notorious cold cases. This confession provides details that only someone with direct knowledge of Victoria Chamberlain's murder could have known." Foster immediately called for a full forensics team to process the Montgomery mansion as a potential crime scene, and he contacted the district attorney's office to discuss the legal implications of Amanda's confession. While he waited for backup to arrive, he began reviewing the other documents in the leather satchel. The evidence that Amanda had collected was extensive and meticulously organized. She had documented Jonathan's embezzlement with bank records, client account statements, and even recorded phone conversations in which Jonathan discussed his illegal activities. The photographs of their affair were date-stamped and showed a relationship that had been ongoing for nearly a year before Victoria's murder. But perhaps most importantly, Amanda had included detailed maps and directions to the location where they had buried Victoria's body. The site was described as being approximately 40 miles northwest of Houston, near a small town called Pinehurst, in an area of old-growth forest that bordered Sam Houston National Forest. "She wanted the truth to come out eventually," Foster observed as he studied Amanda's careful documentation. "This isn't just a confession, it's a complete case file. She documented everything because she knew that someday someone would need this evidence to prove what really happened." As the forensics team began processing the Montgomery mansion, Foster drove to the home where Victoria Chamberlain had grown up, knowing that he faced one of the most difficult conversations of his career. Theodore and Catherine Chamberlain, now in their 70s, had never given up hope that their daughter might someday return home, despite the passage of 15 years. The Chamberlain mansion looked much as it had in 1998, though the gardens showed signs of their owner's advancing age and the house itself had acquired the dignified patina that comes with decades of careful maintenance. Theodore answered the door himself, and Foster could see that the years of uncertainty had taken their toll on the oil executive who had once been one of Houston's most powerful businessmen. "Detective Foster," Theodore said, recognizing the detective from previous visits over the years, "do you have news about Victoria?" "Mr. Chamberlain," Foster replied gently, "I do have news, and I'm afraid it's going to be very difficult to hear." "May I come in? I'd like to speak with both you and Mrs. Chamberlain." Catherine Chamberlain appeared in the foyer, her face immediately reflecting the dread that every parent of a missing child carries permanently just beneath the surface. At 72, she was still a beautiful woman, but the years of not knowing her daughter's fate had etched lines of sadness around her eyes that no amount of wealth or social standing could erase. They sat in the same living room where Victoria had spent countless hours as a child, reading Bible stories and playing with the dollhouse that still occupied one corner of the room. Foster took a deep breath before beginning the conversation that would finally give the Chamberlains answers to their 15-year-old questions. "Mr. and Mrs. Chamberlain," he began, "this afternoon we discovered evidence that conclusively proves what happened to Victoria on April 18, 1998. I need to tell you that Victoria was murdered that night by Jonathan Westbrook, with the assistance of Amanda Montgomery." Catherine Chamberlain's face went completely white, and Theodore reached for her hand as Foster continued. "We found a detailed confession written by Amanda Montgomery in 2007, along with extensive evidence documenting both the affair between Amanda and Jonathan's plan to defraud Victoria's trust fund after their marriage." "Murdered?" Theodore's voice was barely audible. "But we always thought, we hoped." "I know," Foster said compassionately. "I know you held on to the possibility that Victoria had chosen to disappear and might someday come home. But the evidence we found makes it clear that Victoria was killed because she had discovered the truth about Jonathan's criminal activities and refused to remain silent about them." Catherine was crying now, but Foster could see that alongside her grief was a sense of relief that the terrible uncertainty was finally over. "Detective Foster," she said through her tears, "can you tell us, did she suffer? Was she afraid?" Foster hesitated before answering, knowing that the truth would be painful but that the Chamberlains deserved to know everything. According to Amanda's confession, Victoria died believing that they were going to work out a solution to the situation she had discovered. She trusted them until the very end, which means she probably wasn't afraid until it was too late to suffer. Where is she?" Theodore asked. Amanda's confession includes directions to the burial site. "We'll be conducting a search tomorrow morning, and if we find Victoria's remains, we'll be able to bring her home for the proper burial she deserves." As Foster prepared to leave, Theodore asked the question that had been haunting him since the detective's arrival. "What happened to Jonathan and Amanda? Are they still alive? Will there be any justice for what they did to our daughter?" Foster had been dreading this part of the conversation. "Mr. Chamberlain, Amanda Montgomery appears to have died sometime around 2007, shortly after writing her confession. We're still investigating the circumstances of her death, but it appears to have been either suicide or natural causes related to her deteriorating mental health." "And Jonathan?" "Jonathan Westbrook is still alive. He's been living in Dallas under his own name, where he remarried and continued working in investment banking. He has no idea that Amanda's confession has been discovered, and he will be arrested tomorrow morning on charges of murder and fraud." The search for Victoria's remains began at dawn on a cold October morning in the woods outside Pinehurst, Texas. Foster led a team of forensic anthropologists, cadaver dogs, and search and rescue specialists to the area described in Amanda's confession. The location was a natural clearing in old-growth forest, surrounded by towering pine trees that had stood for over a century. Amanda's directions were remarkably precise, leading the search team directly to a depression in the earth that had been concealed by 15 years of fallen leaves and natural forest growth. The cadaver dogs immediately indicated the presence of human remains, and within hours, the forensics team had begun the careful process of excavation. "We found human remains," Dr. Sarah Martinez, the lead forensic anthropologist, reported to Foster as the excavation progressed. "Based on the size and condition of the bones, we're looking at an adult female who was probably in her 20s or 30s at the time of death." As the excavation continued, the team recovered not only Victoria's skeletal remains but also personal items that confirmed her identity. Her distinctive engagement ring, engraved with her and Jonathan's initials and their wedding date, was still on her finger. A gold necklace that her parents recognized as a gift for her college graduation was found around her neck. Most significantly, they found fragments of the white silk blouse and black evening pants that Victoria had been wearing when she left River Oaks Country Club for the last time. The fabric had deteriorated significantly over the years, but enough remained to match the description that witnesses had provided in 1998. "Mr. and Mrs. Chamberlain," Foster said during the phone call that officially ended their 15-year wait for answers, "we've found Victoria. She's coming home." The arrest of Jonathan Westbrook took place at his Dallas office on October 23, 2013, 25 years to the day after Victoria Chamberlain had been murdered. Westbrook, now 57 years old, had built a successful second career and a new life based on the foundation of his first victim's death. When Detective Foster and two Dallas police officers appeared at Westbrook's office, he immediately knew why they were there. His face went ashen as Foster read him his rights, and several of his colleagues watched in shock as one of their most respected partners was led away in handcuffs. Jonathan Alexander Westbrook, Foster said formally, "You are under arrest for the murder of Victoria Elizabeth Chamberlain and for conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent." During the interrogation that followed, Westbrook initially attempted to deny any involvement in Victoria's death, claiming that Amanda's confession was the product of a disturbed mind and couldn't be trusted. But when confronted with the physical evidence and the detailed documentation that Amanda had preserved, he eventually broke down and provided his own confession. "I never intended for it to go that far," Westbrook said during a recorded interview with Foster and the district attorney. "Amanda and I were just having an affair. It was supposed to end after the wedding. But then Victoria found out about it, and she started asking questions about my business dealings." "What business dealings?" Foster pressed. "I had been borrowing from client accounts to cover some bad investments I had made," Westbrook admitted. "I always intended to pay the money back, but Victoria discovered the discrepancies and threatened to report me to the authorities." "So you decided to kill her rather than face the consequences of your crimes?" Westbrook was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I panicked. I had worked so hard to build my reputation and my career. The thought of losing everything because of some bad investments and a stupid affair. I convinced myself that Victoria was being unreasonable, that she was going to destroy my life over something that could be fixed." "And Amanda Montgomery? How did you convince her to help you murder her best friend?" "Amanda was as afraid as I was," Westbrook said. "I told her that if Victoria exposed our affair and my financial problems, it would destroy both of our families. I convinced her that we had no choice, that Victoria would never be satisfied with anything less than complete ruin for both of us." Foster studied the man who had lived with Victoria's murder on his conscience for 15 years, and felt a mixture of disgust and pity. "Mr. Westbrook, did you ever think about Victoria's family? About the pain you caused them by letting them believe their daughter had abandoned them?" Westbrook's composure finally cracked completely, and he began to cry. "Every day. Every single day for 15 years. I thought about calling them and telling them the truth, but I was too much of a coward. I told myself that they were better off not knowing that Victoria had been murdered, that uncertainty was kinder than the truth. And you just went on with your life. You remarried, built a new career, pretended that nothing had happened." "I tried to," Westbrook said through his tears. "But I never had a day of real peace. I never had a relationship that wasn't haunted by what I had done to Victoria. Every time I looked at my second wife, I thought about how Victoria would never have the chance to marry someone who truly loved her." The trial of Jonathan Westbrook began in March 2014 and became one of the most closely watched criminal proceedings in Houston's history. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Rebecca Martinez, methodically presented the evidence that Amanda Montgomery had preserved, along with Westbrook's own confession and the physical evidence recovered from Victoria's burial site. Victoria's parents, now in their mid-70s, attended every day of the trial, holding hands as they listened to the details of their daughter's final hours and the callous calculations that had led to her death. Their presence in the courtroom served as a powerful reminder of the human cost of Westbrook's crimes. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," D.A. Martinez said during her opening statement, "this case is about the ultimate betrayal of trust. Victoria Chamberlain trusted her fiancé to love and protect her. She trusted her best friend to support and care for her. Instead, these two people, the people closest to her in the world, conspired to murder her rather than face the consequences of their own criminal behavior." The defense attorney, hired by Westbrook's wealthy second wife, attempted to argue that Amanda Montgomery's confession was unreliable and that Westbrook had been coerced into his own admission of guilt. But the physical evidence was overwhelming, and Westbrook's detailed knowledge of the crime scene left no doubt about his culpability. During the victim impact phase of the trial, Theodore Chamberlain delivered a statement that brought many in the courtroom to tears. "Victoria was our only child," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "She was the light of our lives, a young woman who dedicated herself to serving God and helping others. For 15 years, my wife and I have lived with the hope that someday Victoria would come home, that we would be able to hold her again and tell her how much we love her." He paused to compose himself before continuing. "Now we know that hope was false, stolen from us by a man who pretended to love our daughter while planning to rob and murder her. Jonathan Westbrook didn't just kill Victoria, he stole 15 years of our lives, 15 years when we could have been grieving properly and honoring her memory instead of living in false hope." Catherine Chamberlain also spoke, her words carrying the weight of a mother's unconditional love and devastating loss. "Victoria believed in the goodness of people. She trusted easily because she loved completely. Jonathan Westbrook exploited that trust and murdered our daughter to protect his own selfish interests. But what he didn't understand is that Victoria's goodness didn't die with her. Her life continues to inspire people throughout Houston who remember her compassion and her dedication to justice." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with a verdict of guilty on all charges. Jonathan Westbrook was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for Victoria's murder, plus an additional 20 years for conspiracy to commit fraud. As the sentence was read, Westbrook collapsed in his chair, finally confronting the full weight of justice that had been pursuing him for 15 years. In the gallery, Theodore and Catherine Chamberlain held each other tightly, their tears a mixture of grief for their daughter and relief that justice had finally been served. The revelation of Victoria's murder and the circumstances surrounding it sent shockwaves through Houston's social elite, many of whom had known all three parties involved. Several of Westbrook's former clients came forward to report suspicious financial activities, leading to additional charges and civil lawsuits that would ensure he would never again be able to profit from his crimes. But beyond the legal consequences, Victoria's story had awakened something deeper in the Houston community. Her murder had been a crime born of greed, deception, and the callous manipulation of trust, but her life had been a testament to faith, service, and genuine love for others. On a beautiful spring morning in May 2014, Victoria Elizabeth Chamberlain was finally laid to rest in the cemetery of First Presbyterian Church of Magnolia Springs, where she had been scheduled to be married 16 years earlier. The funeral service was attended by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by Victoria's story, her charitable work, and her unwavering faith. Pastor William Henderson, now in his 70s but still serving the congregation where Victoria had grown up, delivered a eulogy that captured the essence of a life that had been cut short but never forgotten. "Victoria Chamberlain was taken from us by evil, but she was not defeated by it," Pastor Henderson said from the pulpit where Victoria had planned to stand as a bride. "Her life was a testament to the truth that goodness is stronger than wickedness, that love is more powerful than hatred, and that God's justice, though sometimes delayed, is never denied." The pastor spoke of how Victoria's death had ultimately exposed criminal activity that might have continued for years, destroying the lives of other innocent victims. "Even in death," he said, "Victoria continued to protect others and ensure that truth would prevail over deception." Victoria's burial site became a place of pilgrimage for people throughout Houston who remembered her charitable work and drew inspiration from her story of faith in the face of betrayal. The headstone, crafted from white marble and engraved with her favorite scripture verse, read, "Victoria Elizabeth Chamberlain, 1970–1998, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you hope and a future." Jeremiah 29 verse 11". Theodore and Catherine Chamberlain, now in their mid-70s, found a measure of peace they had not experienced in 16 years. The uncertainty that had plagued them since 1998 was finally over, and they could grieve properly for their daughter while celebrating the impact her life had made on their community. "Knowing the truth about what happened to Victoria has been devastating," Catherine told a reporter from the Houston Chronicle, "but it has also been healing. For 16 years, we wondered if we had failed her somehow, if there was something we could have done to prevent her disappearance. Now we know that Victoria died because she had the courage to stand up against evil, and that makes us proud of the woman we raised. The Chamberlains established the Victoria Chamberlain Foundation for Truth and Justice, dedicated to supporting victims of financial fraud and domestic violence. The foundation also provided resources for cold case investigations, helping other families find closure for their own unsolved mysteries. Detective Michael Foster, who had been instrumental in solving Victoria's case, became a national speaker on cold case investigations and the importance of never giving up on seeking justice for victims of unsolved crimes. He often began his presentations with Victoria's story, using it to illustrate how truth has a way of emerging even after decades of concealment. Victoria Chamberlain's case taught me that justice delayed is not necessarily justice denied, Foster would tell audiences of law enforcement professionals. Sometimes God allows evidence to remain hidden until exactly the right moment, when the right people will find it and know what to do with it. The Montgomery mansion where Amanda's confession had been discovered was eventually renovated by Maggie O'Sullivan and converted into a retreat center for women who had survived domestic violence and betrayal. The hidden compartment where the evidence had been found was preserved as a reminder that truth always finds a way to emerge from darkness. Amanda Montgomery's fate remained a mystery, though investigators eventually concluded that she had most likely died by suicide sometime in 2007, shortly after writing her confession. Her family confirmed that she had suffered from severe depression and guilt in the years following Victoria's murder, and that she had become increasingly isolated and unstable. Amanda Montgomery was both a perpetrator and a victim, DA Rebecca Martinez observed during a follow-up interview about the case. She made a terrible choice to participate in Victoria's murder, but she also spent 9 years living with the knowledge of what she had done. Her confession shows that she never found peace with her decision, and ultimately, her conscience wouldn't let her take Victoria's secrets to the grave. The case also led to reforms in how financial crimes are investigated and prosecuted in Texas, with new regulations requiring more frequent audits of investment accounts and stricter penalties for advisors who defraud their clients. Victoria's death had exposed vulnerabilities in the system that regulated financial professionals, and her story became a catalyst for protecting future victims. Pastor David Williams of New Hope Community Church, where Victoria had found sanctuary during her darkest hour in 1998, often reflected on the brief time he had spent counseling the young woman who would become one of Houston's most famous crime victims. Victoria came to our church when her world was falling apart, Pastor Williams recalled during a memorial service held at New Hope on the anniversary of her murder. She was searching for God's guidance in the midst of betrayal and heartbreak. What she found was the strength to trust in God's ultimate justice, even when human justice seemed impossible. The pastor noted that Victoria's 2 days of prayer and reflection at New Hope had prepared her spiritually for the confrontation that would cost her life. She left our sanctuary with peace in her heart and confidence that God would work all things together for good, even the terrible circumstances she was facing. That faith sustained her until her final breath. As the years passed, Victoria's story became part of Houston's collective memory, a reminder that evil often disguises itself as love, that truth will ultimately prevail over deception, and that God's justice, though sometimes delayed, is never defeated. Young women throughout Houston and beyond drew inspiration from Victoria's courage to stand up against corruption, even when doing so put her in danger. Her life became a model for how faith should inspire action, how privilege should be used to serve others, and how love should be based on truth rather than convenience. On the 20th anniversary of Victoria's death in 2018, the city of Houston declared April 18 as Victoria Chamberlain Day, dedicated to promoting awareness of domestic violence and financial abuse. The proclamation noted that Victoria's death had ultimately prevented other crimes and protected other victims, making her not just a victim but also a guardian angel for those who came after her. The story of Victoria Elizabeth Chamberlain serves as a powerful reminder that God sees all things, even those hidden in darkness, and that His timing is perfect even when it seems impossibly slow to human understanding. Her life, though cut short, continues to impact lives and inspire faith in the ultimate triumph of good over evil. In the cemetery of First Presbyterian Church of Magnolia Springs, where Victoria's headstone stands beneath the spreading branches of an ancient oak tree, visitors often leave flowers and notes of gratitude for a woman whose death exposed evil and whose life exemplified grace. The inscription on her monument has become a source of comfort for countless people facing their own trials. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you hope and a future." Victoria's story proves that no secret remains hidden forever, that no crime goes unnoticed by the God who sees all things, and that even the darkest betrayal cannot extinguish the light of truth. Her legacy lives on in every act of courage, every stand for justice, and every choice to trust in God's ultimate goodness, even when earthly circumstances seem to suggest otherwise. The vanishing bride of Magnolia Springs had finally come home, not as the naive young woman who had disappeared in 1998, but as a symbol of faith triumphant, truth revealed, and justice served in God's perfect timing. Her 15-year journey from tragedy to triumph reminds us all that with God, no story ends in darkness, every tale of sorrow finds its redemption in His eternal light.